Hello everybody, this is Janie Helms and I will be doing my endocrinology presentation, and its focus will be in the posterior pituitary gland. Now, my main objectives, I'm first going to start by talking about the relationship between the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. Then I'm going to focus and say how the pituitary gland is separated. It has two different lobes that each have their own function. But then, instead of focusing on both lobes equally, I am going to go into more detail only on the posterior. So, what is this connection to the hypothalamus? The hypothalamus, if we remember, or if you do not know, is this little, in this image, it's green, right here, almost in the center of the brain, but towards the base of it, the bottom of it here. And right underneath it, there is this connecting stalk that links the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland. Now, the hypothalamus actually controls this gland right here is split up into two lobes. What it controls is not a constant release of hormones, or it is not a constant thing that happens 100% of the time, but there is a consistent pattern as to how it functions. So the pituitary gland, like I said, has these two lobes. They're called anterior and posterior. The anterior, I'll go ahead and get out of the way since this is as much detail as I'm going to go into it, is that it's made of a granular epithelial tissue, and it does release hormones. It's going to produce and release hormones, and it's going to pass those through our body by the means of blood. So it releases those hormones through blood. The posterior lobe, which is where I want to spend the majority of my time, it's on over here on the right side. It is actually made of nervous tissue. And between it and the hypothalamus, it creates a neuroendocrine system. And I'm going to go into more detail on what that system entails. So, as I said, this is a system that is only between the posterior pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. Now, in that system, there are neurosecretory neurons, and there's a couple populations. They form into two clusters, and so you have these two different nucleus, these two different clusters. You have the supraoptic nucleus and the paraventricular nucleus. Now, on the previous slide, I said that the anterior pituitary produces and releases hormones through our blood. The posterior does not produce its own hormones. It actually only takes the hormones from this neuroendocrine system. It takes the hormones from the hypothalamus, and it will only store and then release when necessary. So the hormones that it releases, they are called vasopressin and oxytocin. And that is what my main focus is going to be now, is going to focus on those two hormones, what they do, what their importance is, and what they can affect in our body. Now, with those two hormones, vasopressin is sometimes called VP hormone, and the oxytocin is called OT. They have many physical and behavioral functions for our bodies. They can help our bodies maintain homeostasis, help us during reproduction or to be able to reproduce, and also, especially the oxytocin, it actually helps us create emotional bonds. So we're going to go into more detail on that. Vasopressin, or VP, this is an image, a little diagram that I took out of our textbook. Now, what it does, it is going to focus on, well, for starters, it is also called the antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. Its main focus is that in our kidneys, when urine is forming, going through the process of our kidneys getting that urine formation, it's going to allow us to conserve water within our body. Okay, it helps maintain that homeostasis where we don't lose everything. It also allows for the contraction of our pretty much our artery walls. So inside, there's a layer in our arteries inside the wall that allows to contract and expand, and it will allow that contraction to occur. Now, contraction of our blood vessels or our arteries doesn't always seem like a good thing, but it does have a benefit. It can help, now this is a minor role, but it can help regulate our blood pressure. So when it causes that constriction, it could cause, let's say we were in a situation where our blood pressure fell too low. That constriction causes our blood pressure to rise. It's going to, cause an issue where blood flow is constricted, it slows down. It can also, with constricting, it helps regulate our body temperature. For example, if let's say one part of our body gets too cold, the blood flow in that area also becomes too cold. And if our blood continues to flow all through our body, it could spread the coldness and make our entire body temperature drop. But because this hormone, the vasopressin, allows for that vasoconstriction, it can stop that cold temperature, that cold blood from spreading to the rest of our body. So it is actually a really good thing to help stabilize body temperature when there is an issue. The oxytocin, it is going to be very specifically kind of in the reproductive areas, especially in females. So during childbirth, it is going to allow the contraction of the smooth muscle in our uterine. It helps make childbirth a little smoother. After childbirth, when breastfeeding, it allows for that milk to eject out of the mammary gland. It allows for when the baby is suckling, it allows for that milk to come out. It goes with that contraction in the mammary gland. It also, simultaneously, as it's allowing and working with these smooth muscles and mammary glands, it also, that hormone in itself, when it is released, it allows for kind of an emotional, when we think hormones, we think emotional. Or at least generally that's my first thought when you ever hear about someone complaining about hormones. You don't necessarily think growth hormones or, vasopressin, but you do think emotions. And this oxytocin is an emotional hormone that helps bonding behaviors. So sometimes doctors or people call it the love hormone, or my personal favorite that just makes me all warm and fuzzy inside is the cuddle hormone. And it helps that mother-baby bonding after childbirth or even while the baby's in the womb. But some doctors even say that they think that it also helps with that emotional bonding between couples or in any relationship. So not only does it help with the contractions of our muscles and help with our mammary glands being able to breastfeed, but it does have that emotional help to our bodies and our minds. So these are the two. I did not do a review page. Here are my references. And so I have the textbook, and then I also have an article that talks about endocrinology and the oxytocin and vasopressin pathways and how they work and function in our body. So again, I do want to go back up, though, to this original picture. So again, hypothalamus, it is what controls the pituitary gland. Even though this is both part of the same gland, they both have two completely different functions. Okay, so you have the anterior that can produce and release its own hormones, and the posterior that only takes what the hypothalamus gives it, and it releases it when necessary. And the most important parts about that, those two hormones that the posterior lobe are in charge of releasing, is that vasopressin and oxytocin. And again, I really do think that it is amazing what just those two little hormones can do, the way that they help our bodies maintain our water balance, help us through that reproduction or childbirth experience, and the nice caring bonds that emotionally are formed from those hormones. Thank you, and there's my presentation.